The neon glow of Los Angeles pierced the night sky on a humid October evening in 2025, casting a surreal shimmer over the Hollywood Hills. Inside a sleek apartment overlooking the city, Júlia Mendes scrolled frantically through her phone, her manicured fingers trembling as the likes on her latest Instagram post ticked upward. 10,000, 15,000, then a disappointing stall at 18,247. At 27, the Brazilian-American influencer was a digital queen, her feed a curated explosion of flawless selfies, designer outfits, and sponsored yoga poses against Venice beach sunsets. But tonight, the numbers gnawed at her. Her heart raced, a cold sweat beating on her forehead. The comments, "You're slipping, Júlia," stung like venom, triggering a spiral of panic she couldn't shake. Júlia's life revolved around this virtual stage. Her days blurred into a cycle of shoots, edits, and live streams, her 2.3 million followers her jury and salvation. The penthouse, with its floor-to-ceiling windows and minimalist decor, was less a home and more a set, the hum of her ring light a constant companion. Yet, beneath the glamour, something was unraveling. Her last call with her mother, a faded memory of a voice pleading for a visit, had ended in a curt, "I'm busy." Friends, ghosted. Relationships, reduced to DMs from brands. The likes were her oxygen, but the air was growing thin. The breaking point came with a notification that jolted her upright. A private message from an anonymous account. "Your soul's drowning in pixels. Wake up." The words hit like a slap, her breath catching as she dropped the phone. Who sent this? A troll? A friend? The screen glowed accusingly, reflecting her wide, haunted eyes. Outside, the city buzzed with traffic and distant sirens, a world she'd forgotten. Júlia's chest tightened, another anxiety attack. She clutched her head, the room spinning as memories flashed. Childhood sketches abandoned, laughter with cousins silenced by schedules. Was this her life now? A hollow shell chasing validation? Rising shakily, she stumbled to the balcony, the cool night air a shock against her skin. Los Angeles stretched before her, a paradox of dreams and despair. The message echoed, "Wake up." For the first time in years, Júlia wondered if she could. The phone buzzed again, another like, but it felt empty. Something had to change, and the seed of that change was planted in the darkness of that night. The morning sun gilded the palm trees of Los Angeles in October 2025, its reflections dancing on the glass windows of Júlia Mendes' penthouse. At 27, she woke to the sound of notifications, her phone in hand before her eyes even opened. The Brazilian-American influencer, with her perfectly wavy brown hair and a rehearsed smile, was a social media icon, amassing 2.3 million followers who devoured every sponsored post and behind-the-scenes story. But that morning, the glow of fame felt dull. She checked the stats from the previous day, 18,247 likes, and frowned. Less than expected. The pressure rose like a tide, and she barely noticed the coffee growing cold on the marble table. Júlia thrived in LA's digital culture. West Hollywood, with its chic boutiques and crowded cafes full of aspiring celebrities, was her playground. Her days began with photo shoots on rooftops overlooking the Hollywood sign, followed by meticulous edits in Photoshop and meetings with brands like Gucci and Nike. The penthouse balcony offered a stunning view of the Griffith Observatory, but she rarely enjoyed it, her eyes glued to the screen. Her phone was an extension of herself, a mirror reflecting her identity, or at least the one she projected. Yet that reflection was cracking. The first signs of anxiety crept into the small things. During a live stream, her smile faltered when a cruel comment popped up. "You look tired." Her stomach churned, and she disconnected without warning, sweat dripping despite the air conditioning. At night, sprawled on a velvet sofa, she bit her nails, a habit she thought she'd overcome, her eyes fixed on engagement metrics. The anonymous message from the night before, "Your soul's drowning in pixels. Wake up," echoed like a persistent whisper. She ignored it, but the weight lingered. Júlia's real connections were crumbling. Her mother, Dona Carla, called weekly from Brazil, her voice heavy with longing, begging for a visit. "Daughter, come see me," she pleaded, but Júlia brushed her off with excuses. "I've got a contract, Mom." The sound of disappointment on the other end stung, but she hung up quickly, returning to Instagram. Friends like Lucas, a photographer who'd helped her start, faded into shadows. He showed up once at the Ivy Cafe, his eyes sad. "You don't even reply anymore," he said, leaving a note with his number. Júlia tucked it away, but never called, the crumpled paper buried in her bag. Loneliness seeped in. At a rodeo drive event, surrounded by flashes and compliments, she felt hollow. Designer clothes and champagne didn't fill the inner silence. During an outdoor yoga session, a follower approached for a selfie, and she smiled, but later vomited in the bathroom, her stomach knotted with nerves. Anxiety became a constant companion, attacks striking without warning. On the Sunset Boulevard traffic, in the building elevator. She sipped water, took deep breaths, but the phone returned to her hands, a vice that soothed and destroyed her all at once. The day's peak came with an unexpected notification. A brand canceled a partnership, citing declining engagement. Julia stared at the screen, the world spinning. Hours later, sitting on the balcony, she watched children playing in the park below, their laughter drifting up to her. A distant memory surfaced, drawing with colored pencils as a child, before the rise of social media. Her phone buzzed, another like, but she set it aside, her eyes welling up. Los Angeles, with its glamour and shadows, enveloped her, but Julia began to sense she was losing something vital. The anonymous message returned to her mind, and for the first time, she wondered if it was worth continuing like this. The twilight painted Los Angeles in shades of orange on a muggy afternoon in October 2025, the heat reflecting off the penthouse windows of Júlia Mendes like a silent warning. At 27, she sat on the floor, surrounded by empty energy drink cans, and her phone tossed a few feet away, its cracked screen blinking with notifications. The brand's cancellation message still burned in her mind, a blow that deepened the crack in her self-esteem. Her 2.3 million followers felt distant, their likes an empty echo. The weight of depression pressed down on her, and she could hardly lift her eyes to the stunning city view. Julia's days had darkened. Photo shoots, once a source of adrenaline, had become a suffocating chore. During a live stream on Santa Monica Beach, she froze, her forced smile crumbling as comments mocked. "Where's the old energy?" Her stomach churned, and she disconnected, running to her car with tears streaming down her face. At night, in the silence of the apartment, she stared at the ceiling, insomnia consuming her. Fragmented dreams brought back childhood memories. Running with cousins in Brazil, laughing without filters. But she woke with a tight chest, the virtual world pulling her back like a magnet. Anxiety morphed into palpable depression. In a meeting with her agent, Sophia, a woman with dark sunglasses and a sharp tone, Julia heard. "Your numbers are dropping. You risk losing everything." The words hit like a punch, and she left without replying, her legs trembling. In her car, parked on Sunset Boulevard, she cried until she couldn't breathe, the noisy traffic outside a stark contrast to her inner void. Her phone vibrated non-stop, messages from brands, followers, but she threw it on the seat, feeling a fleeting relief followed by greater panic. What if she stopped? What if she lost it all? The loss of real connections deepened. One day, her mother, Dona Carla, showed up unannounced at the apartment, her face etched with worry. "You're not my daughter anymore," she said, her voice trembling, before leaving a box of old photos and walking away. Julia opened it, finding pictures of herself drawing, laughing with friends, and broke down, the guilt crushing her. Lucas, the photographer, tried calling again, leaving a voicemail. "I want to help you, Julia." She listened, her heart aching, but didn't call back, fear of facing the real world paralyzing her. The worsening depression led to a breakdown. On a lonely night, she spent hours staring in the mirror, the deep dark circles and fake smile staring back. A panic attack knocked her down, the cold floor against her skin as she struggled to breathe. The phone, now silent, seemed to judge her. The anonymous message, "Wake up," returned to her mind, and for the first time, she considered stopping. She grabbed a forgotten notebook, scribbling. What if I let it all go? The thought scared her, but it also sparked a flicker of curiosity. The decision to try a digital detox came from an unexpected encounter. At a Silver Lake cafe, a barista named Mia noticed her vacant stare and offered tea, saying, "Sometimes unplugging saves you." The kindness touched her, and Mia, a local artist, shared how she'd quit social media to paint. Julia listened, eyes welling up, feeling an echo of her old passion for drawing. On the way home, she passed a park where children played soccer, their laughter cutting through the city noise. She stopped, watching, and something inside her broke. What if she reclaimed that? Back at the penthouse, Julia faced her phone. Notifications blinked like an addiction, but she switched it to airplane mode, the silence wrapping around her like a hug. She picked up the notebook and drew a shaky line, laughing for the first time in weeks. Los Angeles, with its bright lights and deep shadows, challenged her to change. The idea of a detox terrified her, losing followers, status, income. But the chance to rediscover who she was felt worth the risk. Sitting on the balcony, she wrote, one step at a time. The journey was beginning, and an uncertain future called to her. The cold light of dawn illuminated Júlia Mendes' penthouse in Los Angeles, the silence broken only by the distant hum of city traffic in October 2025. At 27, she was curled up on the sofa, a notebook open with clumsy sketches, and her phone turned off beside her. A rare feat, the decision to start a digital detox had left her restless but determined. Yet, the universe seemed to conspire against her. That night, an unexpected event threw her into a turning point that would change everything, stripping away the control she so cherished. It all began with a loud knock on the door. Still groggy, Júlia opened it to find two men in suits, their serious faces and FTC badges, U.S. Federal Trade Commission, staring back at her. Júlia Mendes? The taller one asked, handing her a document. We're investigating inflated engagement practices on your accounts. Your profile has been suspended for 30 days. The floor seemed to vanish beneath her feet. Suspended? Her hands trembled as she took the paper, her eyes racing over the legal jargon. The agency accused her of buying followers and using bots, a common influencer tactic that now exposed her. The phone, even off, seemed to mock her. The turning point hit like a tsunami. Without access to social media, Júlia felt her world collapse. She called Sophia, her agent, who confirmed the worst. The suspension was real, and brands like Nike had already terminated contracts. You need a lawyer, Sophia said, her voice icy, before hanging up. Júlia threw the phone against the wall, the crash echoing in the empty apartment. Tears streamed down as she fell to her knees, the weight of reality crushing her. Without likes, without validation, who was she? The anonymous message, "Wake up," returned to her mind, now with a cruel edge. She'd been forced to disconnect, and panic consumed her. The revelation came as she opened the box left by Dona Carla. Among the photos, she found a yellowed note. "Daughter, you were happy drawing. Go back to it." Her mother's words struck like lightning. Memories flooded in, afternoons in Brazil with pencils and paper, the freedom before screens. She picked up the notebook, her fingers hesitant, and began sketching a crooked palm tree, the act releasing an emotion she hadn't felt in years. But the relief was short-lived. A notification in her email, the only channel still active, warned that hackers had breached her account, posting defamatory messages. The phone, even off, felt like a living threat. The isolation led to an internal confrontation. Without social media, she wandered the apartment, the silence amplifying her loneliness. On the balcony, the glow of Hollywood stared back, but it felt distant, irrelevant. She called Lucas, the photographer, for the first time in months. "I need help," she admitted, her voice breaking. He arrived within an hour, bringing an analog camera and a gentle smile. "Let's start from scratch," he said, showing old photos of her laughing. His presence warmed her, but also shamed her. How much time had she lost? Lucas suggested a retreat in Malibu, far from everything, and Júlia, despite her fear, agreed. The decision terrified her. Without social media, she'd face herself, something she'd avoided for years. On the way to Malibu, she passed Venice Beach, the waves crashing with a calm that contrasted with her inner storm. She stopped the car, stepping out to feel the sand under her feet, a real touch that made her shiver. The phone, stashed in the glove compartment, seemed to call, but she resisted, gazing at the horizon. Los Angeles, with its glamour and traps, had backed her into a corner, but there, by the sea, she glimpsed a taste of freedom. Back in the car, Júlia wrote in the notebook, "Without social media, who am I?" The question guided her, and the Malibu retreat promised answers. The suspension, the hackers, and her mother's note intertwined as a call to start over. With Lucas by her side, she knew the next step would be painful but necessary. The sun set, painting the sky red, and Júlia felt that, for the first time, she was on the verge of finding herself. The morning sun bathed Malibu in a gentle light in October 2025, the Pacific waves crashing softly against the rocky shore where Júlia Mendes walked, her bare feet feeling the cool sand. At 27, she clutched her notebook to her chest, the clumsy drawings an anchor amid her inner turmoil. The suspension of her social media and the retreat with Lucas had thrust her into a new reality, her reactions swinging between relief and dread. Silence, once an enemy, now offered space to breathe, but the void left by notifications left her restless. Julia woke in the rented cabin, a rustic structure with wooden walls and a porch facing the sea. Without her phone, she felt an initial weight, her hands instinctively reaching for the device that wasn't there. Panic came in waves. What if she lost everything? But opening the window, the sound of seagulls calmed her, and she sketched a wave in her notebook, the pencil trembling with insecurity. Lucas arrived with coffee, his calm smile welcoming her. "No rush," he said, handing her an analog camera. His kindness moved her, rekindling a connection she'd nearly forgotten. Julia's emotions were a minefield. During a hike on the Point Dume trail, she stopped, the salty wind tousling her hair, and cried. The absence of social media left her exposed, her anxiety attacks less frequent, but depression made her question her worth. "Who am I without likes?" she murmured to herself, sitting on a rock. Lucas approached, pointing to a seagull soaring free. "You're more than numbers," he said softly. The words touched her, and she began photographing, capturing nature with a childlike curiosity that surprised her. Adjusting to this new reality came with small steps. In the cabin, Julia found a shelf of old books, picking one about Malibu's history. Reading without thinking of posting felt strange, but comforting. In the afternoon, she helped Lucas cook dinner, something she hadn't done in years, laughing as she burned the rice, the sound echoing in the simple space. His presence grounded her, and she confessed, gazing at the stove flames. "I missed this." Lucas nodded, sharing how he'd quit social media for peace, inspiring her to persevere. A call from Sophia shattered the calm. "The suspension could turn into a lawsuit if we don't act," she warned, her voice sharp. Julia hesitated, the fear of returning to chaos paralyzing her, but she hung up without promising anything, choosing to stay offline. The act freed her but also scared her. What if Brands abandoned her forever? On the porch under the stars, she wrote, "I'm finding myself." The phrase guided her, though the future remained hazy. Rediscovering hobbies brought light. With Lucas, she tried watercolor painting, the awkward brushstrokes reflecting her soul in transition. One afternoon, she drew Donna Carla from a photo, tears falling on the paper as she silently asked for forgiveness. Art connected her to the past, and she began planning a letter to her mother, a step toward reclaiming that bond. Malibu, with its cliffs and calm sea, contrasted with LA's chaos, offering a mirror for her transformation. Emotionally, Julia struggled to accept herself. The lack of digital validation stripped her bare, but also liberated her. One night, she dreamed of Brazil, running with cousins, and woke with a rare smile. Lucas encouraged her to record her paintings on video, but not to post, just for herself. "Your worth isn't on a screen," he said, and she nodded, feeling a slow growth. Los Angeles, with its distant glow, seemed like a closed chapter, while Malibu invited her to rewrite her story. The retreat progressed, and Julia felt a fragile balance. With Lucas as support, she explored new steps, painting, photographing, writing, each one a brick in rebuilding herself. On the beach, she watched the sunset, the fiery sky mirroring her journey. She wrote, "I'm alive again." The phrase marked a fresh start, and she knew that, despite the challenges, she was ready for the next chapter. The fresh morning breeze swept over Malibu in October 2025, the Pacific waves carrying a salty scent that drifted into the cabin where Júlia Mendes spent her days. At 27, she sat on the porch, an open notebook with unfinished watercolors and an analog camera beside her, a testament to her struggle to disconnect. The digital detox challenged her more than she'd imagined, each day bringing new obstacles, but also encounters that shaped her growth. Silence, once oppressive, now invited her to rediscover herself. The detox challenges intensified. Without social media, Julia felt a void that woke her in a sweat, her fingers itching for a phone she wasn't using. During a meditation attempt on the beach, the buzz of a drone, likely from a local influencer, sent her running inside, heart racing. The digital world pursued her, even there. Lucas found her trembling, offering hot tea. "It's normal to feel this at first," he said, sharing how it took him months to adjust. His vulnerability comforted her, and she began to trust him more, an unexpected support. Interactions with secondary characters enriched her journey. One afternoon, a retreat neighbor, Elena, a 60-year-old retired therapist with gray hair and kind eyes, knocked with a homemade cake. "I heard you're rediscovering yourself," she said, sitting to chat. Elena spoke of her own battle with loneliness after quitting social media. encouraging Julia to write letters as therapy. Inspired, she drafted a long message to Dona Carla, the words flowing like tears. Elena also suggested painting outdoors, and together, they created a canvas of seagulls, an act that connected her to nature. Julia's emotional growth took shape. One night, around a campfire with Lucas and Elena, she opened up. "I hid behind likes," she confessed, the fire reflecting in her teary eyes. Lucas shared how photography saved him, while Elena revealed losing a daughter to digital addiction, a story that shocked and motivated her. Inspired, Julia began documenting the retreat in a journal, blending drawings and thoughts. One entry read, "I'm rebuilding myself piece by piece." The phrase guided her, despite her insecurities. Challenges persisted, though. A call from Sophia brought new pressure. Brands are offering to return, but with conditions. The temptation made her hesitate, the desire to reclaim fame clashing with her progress. On the porch, she tore up the contract Sophia sent, the paper flying with the wind, an act of courage that left her exhausted but free. Lucas supported her, suggesting a joint project, a photo and painting exhibit without social media. The idea excited her but also scared her. What if no one cared? Authentic relationships began to bloom. One morning, Dona Carla replied to the letter, her trembling voice on the phone. "You've come back to me." The call, the first in months, made her cry with joy, and she promised to visit. With Elena, she developed a friendship, learning recipes and resilient stories. Lucas became a creative partner, teaching her to adjust the camera. During a beach session, he photographed her laughing, a genuine smile she hadn't seen in years. The camera click sealed a moment of connection, and Julia felt she belonged again. Emotionally, she faced her shadows. Dreams of the past, LA parties, blinding flashes, haunted her, but waking to the sea's sound brought her back. One afternoon, she painted a self-portrait, the raw strokes revealing her vulnerability. "I see myself," she wrote in the journal, a milestone in her journey. Malibu, with its tranquil rhythm and towering cliffs, contrasted with LA's chaos, offering a space to heal. With Lucas and Elena as allies, she felt a fragile but real balance. The retreat progressed, and Julia planned the exhibit, a step to share her art without relying on likes. On the porch under a starry sky, she wrote, "The shadow is fading." The phrase reflected her evolution, and she knew that, despite the challenges, she was closer to her true self. The sky over Malibu turned dramatic hues at dusk in October 2025, the heavy clouds reflecting the tension in the air as Júlia Mendes prepared for the exhibition in a rented warehouse near the beach. At 27, she adjusted paintings and photos with trembling hands, her heart racing with uncertainty. The digital detox had transformed her, but the final confrontation with her past and the virtual world was at hand. The exhibition, planned with Lucas and Elena, promised answers, and what unfolded that night would seal her journey of overcoming. The crowd began to arrive, a mix of curious locals and former followers who'd heard rumors. Julia, dressed in a simple blouse and jeans, felt exposed without the filters of social media. Her paintings, raw landscapes and vulnerable self-portraits, and Lucas's photos, capturing her evolution, hung on the walls. But the peak came with Sophia's arrival, accompanied by a Nike executive. "We have a proposal," Sophia said, handing her a contract. "Come back and we'll double your fee." The temptation made her pause, her eyes fixed on the paper, but a glance at Lucas, who shook his head, anchored her. The turning point struck when Dona Carla walked in, her eyes welling up as she saw Julia's drawings. "My daughter," she whispered, hugging her tightly. Her mother's presence, flown from Brazil after the letter, brought overwhelming relief and tears. But the moment exploded when a video began playing on the makeshift screen. Hackers had released old recordings of Julia manipulating engagement, a secret under FTC investigation. The crowd murmured and Julia froze, the floor vanishing beneath her. Sophia stepped back, the executive left, and she felt the weight of exposure. The emotional response came in an act of courage. With her heart pounding, Julia climbed onto a chair, grabbing the microphone. "This is me," she said, her voice steady despite the tears. "I messed up, lost myself in likes, but I'm here to make amends." She shared her journey, the anxiety, the depression, the detox, and pointed to the paintings. "This is who I am now." The crowd's silence gave way to applause, and Dona Carla hugged her again, proud. Lucas smiled, photographing the moment, while Elena nodded emotionally from the back. The surprising resolution came with the community's reaction. A local journalist present at the exhibition recorded everything and posted a report online titled, "The Fall and Rise of Júlia Mendes." The story went viral, not for likes but for authenticity. People began arriving with their own artwork, turning the exhibition into a movement of disconnected artists. A woman handed Júlia a drawing saying, "You inspired me to ditch my phone." The gesture moved her, sealing her redemption. Emotionally, Júlia experienced a catharsis. Exposing her flaws at the exhibition freed her, and the support from Dona Carla, Lucas, and Elena healed old wounds. On the warehouse porch under a starry sky, she wrote in her notebook, "I found myself in truth." The phrase marked her victory, overcoming the dependency that had defined her. The phone, still off, no longer called to her. She donated it to a charity that night, a symbol of rebirth. The impact grew. The report drew attention from NGOs inviting her to lead digital detox workshops, a purpose that filled her with pride. Lucas suggested documenting the movement, and Elena offered her home as a base. Malibu, with its calm sea and towering cliffs as witnesses, contrasted with the chaos of LA, now a distant memory. The exhibition ended with a line of people requesting autographs, not as an influencer, but as an artist. Júlia signed with a smile, feeling alive. The night progressed, and Júlia knew her journey hadn't ended but truly begun. With Dona Carla by her side, she looked to the future, ready to turn her pain into inspiration. The sound of the waves seemed to applaud, and she wrote one last line. The light prevailed. The phrase closed a chapter and opened a new one, brimming with possibilities. The morning sun bathed Malibu in a golden light in October 2025, the Pacific waves whispering a serene melody as Júlia Mendes walked along the beach, her notebook tucked under her arm and a gentle smile on her face. At 27, she felt the weight of the transformation that had brought her here, the digital detox leaving scars, but also a peace she'd never known. The exhibition had changed her life, and now, back at the cabin with Dona Carla, Lucas, and Elena, she reflected on the journey, tying up the threads of her story. Júlia pondered the distance she'd overcome. The obsession with likes, which had led to anxiety and depression, now felt like a distant dream. The suspension of her social media, initially a punishment, had become her liberation, and the exhibition exposed not only her flaws but her strength. Sitting on the porch, she flipped through her notebook, pausing at a drawing of Dona Carla laughing, a living memory of their embrace the night before. "You brought me back," her mother said, eyes shining, and Júlia knew their reconciliation arc was complete. The letter and visit sealed a bond that social media had stolen. Lucas's arc also found closure. His support during the retreat and partnership in the exhibition reignited his passion for photography, and he now planned a book about disconnected artists, featuring Júlia prominently. "You gave me a purpose," he said, showing the first pages. Their friendship blossomed, an alliance forged in vulnerability that promised to endure. Elena, in turn, saw in Júlia a reflection of her own redemption, offering her home as a base for the detox workshops. "You healed something in me," the therapist confessed, and together, they planted a tree in the garden, symbolizing renewal. Malibu, with its serene cliffs and the sea as a witness, contrasted with the chaos of Los Angeles, now a memory Júlia faced with gratitude. The city that had shaped her as an influencer had also forced her to reinvent herself, and she planned to use that experience to help others. The workshops, already underway, gathered people eager to disconnect, and Júlia led with talks on art and resilience. A participant, a teenager named Zoe, handed her a drawing saying, "You saved me from my phone." The gesture moved her, reinforcing her purpose. Emotionally, Júlia felt a new balance. The absence of social media lightened her, and dreaming of Brazil, dancing with cousins, drawing without rush, connected her to a lost identity. On the beach, she painted a final self-portrait, the soft strokes reflecting acceptance. She wrote in her notebook, "I am more than pixels." The phrase closed her internal struggle, marking her overcoming of the dependency that had defined her. With Dona Carla by her side, she planned a trip to Brazil, returned to her roots that would heal her fully. The future unfolded with hope. Lucas suggested expanding the movement, creating a network of retreats, and Elena offered contacts to fund the project. Júlia saw this as a mission, to turn her pain into a legacy. On the porch under a clear sky, she wrote, "The journey continues, but now with light." The phrase opened doors to what lay ahead, and she knew her story would inspire others. Julia's transformation proves it's possible to find yourself beyond screens. Watch the next video to discover new stories of courage and renewal. Subscribe to the channel for more inspiration, and share this message with those needing a fresh start. Together, we can build a world where authenticity shines. Begin your journey today.